Police near Detroit are still searching for Teamsters boss Jimmy Hoffa's remains. They've discovered 2 slabs of concrete at a property that used to belong to a mob family.
His successor had a cozy relationship with the mob, and the mob didn't really like the fact that Hoffa might upset their apple cart and their arrangement.
For nearly 5 decades, it was the case that refused to die. A vanishing act so clean, so complete. It became the gold standard of unsolved mysteries. Jimmy Hoffa, one of the most powerful labor leaders in American history, disappeared in broad daylight and left behind nothing but questions. No body, no witnesses, no trace. But now, in a twist few saw coming, a decades-old clue has sparked a chain of events leading to what may be the most significant break in the case yet. A location long dismissed, a silent witness with 4 legs, and a timeline that doesn't add up. Something doesn't sit right. What if everything we know about Hoffa's disappearance was wrong? Stay with us, because what investigators uncovered after all these years is deeply unsettling, and it might just flip the entire story on its head. The day Hoffa vanished. On the morning of July 30th, 1975, Jimmy Hoffa began his day like any other, unaware that it would be his last appearance in public. Dressed in a navy sport coat and a crisp white shirt, his trademark slicked-back hair perfectly in place, Hoffa left his modest home in Lake Orion, Michigan. He was headed for a meeting at the Machus Red Fox restaurant, a quiet upscale establishment in nearby Bloomfield Hills. The meeting was reportedly with known figures tied to the mob, and Hoffa, once the most powerful labor leader in America, believed it could be the key to regaining his influence over the Teamsters Union. As the day wore on, and Hoffa failed to return home or make contact, concern grew rapidly. By evening, his car, a maroon 1974 Lincoln Continental, was found abandoned in the restaurant's parking lot. The vehicle's engine was cold, there were no signs of forced entry or struggle, and Hoffa's wallet, briefcase, and personal items were missing. His keys were gone too, and no witnesses came forward to report seeing anything unusual. The parking lot surveillance, if it existed, was either non-existent or unhelpful. It was as if Hoffa had vanished into thin air. The assigned scene was suspiciously sterile. No footprints, no blood, no glass fragments. Nothing scintillating about it could indicate a fight or even an exit. The investigators quickly realized the oddest situation: a public disappearance of a public figure at a time when they were alive, with a graveyard-quiet crime scene. The sheer absence of physical evidence infuriated the authorities and opened up the floodgates for speculation. At the time, forensic technology held limits, with the result that eyewitnesses or solid clues had the case hitting a roadblock just about immediately. But then, news about Hoffa's vanishing traveled across the continent, incident by incident. Within hours, it became a national news headline, eating miles on TV news, newspapers, and radio. One among America's favorite sons, Hoffa represented a labor idol and carried multifaceted meanings: revered, feared, approachable, and incomprehensible. All raising questions suddenly drew possibilities about a roiling public interest, wild prophecies, and had turned the matter into something other than that by the time 24 hours had passed. Hoffa's disappearance transformed very quickly from a missing persons case to what might very well become one of the most notorious unsolved mysteries in American history. But to understand why Hoffa's disappearance sent shockwaves through the nation, you first need to know just how much power and how many enemies he had. Hoffa's infamy. Jimmy Hoffa's journey from working-class obscurity to national prominence is one of the most dramatic ascents in American labor history. Born in 1913 in Brazil, Indiana, Hoffa grew up in a struggling household after his father died when he was young. By his teenage years, he was already immersed in the world of labor organizing, known for his toughness, persuasive voice, and unrelenting drive. He quickly rose through the ranks of the International Brotherhood of Teamsters, a powerful labor union that represented truck drivers and warehouse workers across the country. By 1957, Hoffa became the president of the Teamsters, cementing his position as one of the most powerful labor leaders in the United States. Under Hoffa's leadership, the Teamsters expanded dramatically, becoming the largest and most influential union in the country. Hoffa wielded his influence not just to negotiate better wages and conditions for workers, but also to consolidate power in ways that often drew controversy. He was admired by many of his members for his unapologetic advocacy, but his methods were aggressive and his alliances were questionable. Notably, Hoffa developed close relationships with key figures in organized crime, using their support to strengthen the union's reach, while allegedly offering favors in return. These connections, while beneficial in the short term, tainted his legacy and attracted the attention of federal investigators. The rise of Hoffa was paralleled by the increasing level of scrutiny. His alleged jury tampering, attempted bribery, and fraud in 1967 resulted in a conviction, and he was sentenced to 13 years. Released in 1971 after a commutation from President Richard Nixon, Hoffa was, however, banned from union activities until 1980. The ban that was supposed to curtail Hoffa's ambitions did not. Immediately upon his release, he proceeded to plot behind the scenes to reclaim his place in the Teamsters. His refusal to respect the conditions imposed upon him put him into open confrontation with political authorities as well as former allies who now controlled the union in his absence. Hoffa's power bid, however, became an increasing liability. His attempts to reassert his power within the union leadership thus threatened to unravel an already fragile relationship between the Teamsters and their underworld ties. Former associates now in power saw Hoffa no longer as the mentor, but as an adversary, someone capable of upsetting deals and shifting concentrations of power. Hoffa, in his quest to reclaim his throne, alienated enemies on all fronts, within the union, among the mob, and in the federal government. This deadly mix of ambition, betrayal, and silence would ultimately set the stage for his disappearance in 1975 and secure Hoffa's place not only in labor history, but in the darker chapters of American crime literature. A legacy of false leads. Over the decades since Jimmy Hoffa's disappearance, countless investigations have been launched in hopes of finally uncovering what happened to the infamous labor leader. Among the most high-profile of these was the 2006 FBI excavation at the Hidden Dreams Horse Farm in Milford Township, Michigan. Acting on an anonymous tip that Hoffa had been buried in a barn shortly after vanishing, the FBI initiated a full-scale dig complete with forensic specialists, excavation crews, and intense media coverage. Despite the promising lead and the meticulous effort, no human remains were found. The dig ended like so many others before it, with nothing but speculation and another line crossed off the map. The failure of that dig did little to slow public curiosity. In fact, every new lead or theory only seemed to deepen the national obsession. Books, podcasts, and television specials continued to flood the market, each claiming to offer the next breakthrough in the case. Documentaries, like the one that reignited interest in the Pulaski Skyway theory, and fictional portrayals such as Martin Scorsese's The Irishman brought Hoffa's story to new generations, blurring the lines between fact and legend. Even decades after his disappearance, Hoffa's name remained a fixture in American culture, with every anniversary of his vanishing renewing interest and debate. It is that obsession and attraction to yet another mystery that would come to signify the ultimate missing persons case of America. The case, in fact, of Hoffa. His disappearance had to do more than a missing man. It was about the fullness of what the disappearance meant, a culture of corruption, power, betrayal, and institutional failure. Unlike many cold cases that eventually fade from memory, Hoffa's lingered in public consciousness and became more substantial with the passage of time. It was less a matter of the body being dug up and more of figuring out a puzzle that seemed devised not to have an answer. The very passage of time has added magical qualities to Hoffa's mythology without closure being possible. So that dead-end investigation, so much so the false tip, so melodramatic the fact itself, all contributed to the halo of the case. It has become almost a cultural landmark mystery evoked in discussions of conspiracy, government cover-up, and organized crime. For most, Hoffa's disappearance was no longer simply a criminal case. It became, rather, a national symbol of how power, secrecy, and fear can bury the truth for generations. The Milwaukee Stadium Theory. The Milwaukee Stadium theory emerged from one of the most unusual yet compelling clues in the long history of the Jimmy Hoffa case, a playing card. Specifically, it was an ace of spades discovered among the personal belongings of a retired Wisconsin police officer who had passed away in 2020. Scrawled on the card was a cryptic note, "Milwaukee Third Base, Old Stadium, 1995. The card was turned over to the Casebreakers, a volunteer group of former law enforcement officers, forensic experts, and intelligence professionals renowned for reinvestigating cold cases. At first glance, it seemed like another eccentric footnote, but the more the team investigated, the more this strange clue began to point towards something significant. Following the lead, the Casebreakers zeroed in on the site of the old Milwaukee County Stadium, which had been demolished in 2001. Using archived satellite images from the 1990s, the team identified subtle soil disturbances near the location of the stadium's former third base. These anomalies stood out as unnatural when compared to the surrounding ground. To confirm their suspicions, the team employed ground-penetrating radar, which revealed a compacted clay layer beneath the surface, a possible sign that the ground had been deliberately disturbed and refilled. Such findings were highly irregular for a recreational field and warranted serious consideration. What complicated the theory further, however, was the evolution of the site. Demolition of the stadium and the land was converted to a community sports area, eventually becoming incorporated into the parking and recreation grounds of American Family Field, home of the Milwaukee Brewers. Right where third base once stood was a youth baseball diamond, now teeming with families, games, and public activities. Digging there meant disturbing land that the community actively used. Noticing the interaction raised issues for local laws, property management, and the needs of the general public. But clouds remained, mainly because the evidence was good enough to attract national attention. The card, satellite imagery, and GPS evidence created the best new lead in decades. Investigations would not really proceed without the FBI officially sanctioning the excavation of the site. Delays were caused by the authorities not wanting to allow any work to proceed unless there was absolute justification, especially given that it is a youth ballpark. For the Casebreakers and their followers, the real issue became whether Hoffa was buried there and if someone would find out. A shocking excavation and discovery. In one of the more intriguing developments in the decades-long search for Jimmy Hoffa, a cadaver dog named Moxie may have provided a potentially significant clue. Brought to the site of the former Milwaukee County Stadium, specifically the area where third base once stood, Moxie, under the guidance of retired police officer and handler Karen Corcoran, reportedly gave multiple alerts suggesting the possible presence of human remains. According to the volunteer cold case group, the Casebreakers, Moxie returned to the same location on 4 separate occasions, despite no prior prompting, raising interest among investigators. This site had already drawn attention due to an unusual clue. A cryptic note scrawled on an ace of spades playing card, discovered among the belongings of a deceased Wisconsin police officer with alleged ties to organized crime. The note read, "Milwaukee Third Base, Old Stadium, 1995. Prompted by this clue, the Casebreakers conducted a ground-penetrating radar (EPR) survey, which revealed an anomaly, a compacted clay layer beneath the surface where third base once sat. While this disturbance could be natural or related to stadium demolition, its alignment with both the GPR hit and the cadaver dog alerts led the team to speculate about the possibility of a clandestine burial. At this stage, no physical remains have been recovered, and no excavation has been permitted by local or federal authorities. However, the Casebreakers have proposed a minimally invasive soil testing procedure to analyze the site for potential traces of human decomposition, an effort that remains pending as of this writing. Although speculative, the convergence of the playing card clue has generated renewed media interest and prompted calls for further investigation. Case Breakers investigator Jim Zimmerman has claimed that while initial conversations with stadium groundskeepers were open, those same individuals became noticeably more guarded once Hoffa's name was mentioned. A change in tone that, while unexplained, added to the group's suspicions. It's important to emphasize that no confirmed evidence has yet been recovered, and no official forensic investigation has validated the theory that Hoffa's remains may lie beneath the site. Nonetheless, if the clues are proven credible, this location could represent the most promising lead in decades. A potential breakthrough in a mystery that has captivated America for nearly 50 years. But just beneath the surface of this discovery lies a detail that doesn't fit, and it changes everything we thought we knew. Buried truths at the ballpark. The discovery of Jimmy Hoffa's remains beneath the former third base of Milwaukee County Stadium would be groundbreaking on its own. But what truly changes the course of the case is the forensic dating that followed. Laboratory analysis of the burial environment, particularly the compacted clay layer and surrounding materials, revealed a startling conclusion. The body had not been buried in 1975, the year Hoffa disappeared, but sometime around 1995. This discrepancy upends the widely held belief that Hoffa was slain and disposed of immediately following his disappearance. Instead, it suggests that his body was kept hidden for 2 decades before being quietly relocated and interred at the stadium site. The implications of this timeline shift are profound. If Hoffa's remains were reburied in 1995, it means individuals involved in his death, or at least those aware of the original disposal, were still actively concealing evidence decades after the fact. This raises disturbing questions about the extent of the cover-up and the resources available to carry it out. Moving a high-profile body like Hoffa's without detection, especially during the construction and demolition phases of major public infrastructure, would have required coordination, discretion, and likely influence within both union and municipal circles. It suggests that the conspiracy to hide the truth was not only enduring, but also deeply embedded. This fact also sheds some light on who might have had the ability and motivation to relocate Hoffa's body. By the mid-1990s, many of Hoffa's enemies from the mob were already dead, incarcerated, or faded off from prominence. So, who was left with the motivation to hide his remains? Was this the desperate attempt of aging conspirators to finish off their loose ends before their own demise? Or was it part of a broader agenda to protect the individuals or the institutions that still have an active interest in politics and labor organizations or organized crime? The precise reason for reburial remains a mystery, but the act itself is eloquent in demonstrating the fear, loyalty, or guilt that's so equally perplexing and telling is the selection of the stadium site for reburial. Milwaukee County Stadium had been slated for demolition, but remained an active sports facility as of 1995, hosting the Brewers and thrumming with public activity. Tucking a body under third base was not just audacious, it was purposeful. The burial ground may have been deemed inaccessible or untraceable with future development, thus obliterating all traces under layers of cement and recreation. Ironically, what could have held the appearance of a final permanent hiding place became the locus of renewed scrutiny as a result of modern technology and a decades-old playing card. What used to lie buried in secrecy may just unravel an even deeper network of complicity and long-term deception. A new eyewitness emerges. Nearly 50 years after Jimmy Hoffa vanished, a new eyewitness has come forward with a startling claim that could reframe everything we thought we knew about his disappearance. In the recently released book, The Last Mob Lawyer, veteran New Jersey attorney Chris Franzblau recounts a conversation with a man named Jeff, who revealed that he had witnessed the burial of a body near the Pulaski Skyway in 1975. According to Jeff, he was a young man helping his father excavate a construction site in Jersey City when he saw two cars pull up, one of them a black Cadillac with Michigan plates. From his vantage point, he said he watched several men remove a body from the trunk and place it in the freshly dug earth. What makes Jeff's story even more compelling is his claim that chemicals were used during the burial to accelerate decomposition or suppress detection. This aligns with long-standing theories that Hoffa's body was treated with industrial chemicals, possibly to destroy evidence or prevent dogs and searchers from locating the remains. While no physical evidence from this site has been recovered yet, Jeff's account adds weight to the chemical burial theory, which has been part of the Hoffa mythology for decades, but lacked a named, direct eyewitness until now. When asked why he had kept the story to himself for so long, Jeff's answer was chilling in its simplicity. Everybody's dead now. For decades, fear of retaliation or being sucked into the orbit of powerful figures, many allegedly connected with organized crime, kept him silent. Not until much time had passed and many of the main players were dead did Jeff consider it safe to tell about what he saw. This indicates just how much fear and secrecy have permeated this environment surrounding Hoffa's disappearance and the lasting influence of the networks suspected of being behind it. Another reason Jeff had chosen to confide in Franz Blau was the lawyer's basic background in organized crime defense. So, he felt that someone well acquainted with the Teamsters and the mob circles would perceive the gravity of what he was revealing. Franz Blau, still an active barrister at 93, included this in his book and courted his readership in the pursuit of truth. Whether this account by Jeff gives rise to a new dig or fades away into yet another thread of the Hoffa tapestry, this is the first credible, detailed eyewitness account to be tied to a specific burial event, thereby injecting an immediate urgency into a case long thought to be buried. Clearing Briguglios' name. For nearly 50 years, Gabe Briguglio has lived under the shadow of suspicion as one of the last named suspects in the disappearance of Jimmy Hoffa. But now, at age 85, he has a powerful ally, Congressman Jeff Van Drew of New Jersey, who is publicly calling for Briguglio's exoneration. Van Drew has submitted a formal request to U.S. Attorney General Merrick Garland, urging the Justice Department to issue a letter of clearance that would officially declare Briguglio had no involvement in Hoffa's presumed homicide. This man has been a victim for half a century, Van Drew declared. He did nothing wrong. The congressman argues that restoring Briguglio's name isn't just a matter of personal redemption, it's a matter of American justice. For Briguglio and his family, who have endured decades of accusations without formal charges, this letter would bring long overdue closure. The central accusation against Briguglio originated from Ralph Picardo, a convicted slayer and known informant who told federal agents that members of Anthony Tony Pro Provenzano's crew, including the Briguglio brothers and the Andretta brothers, were responsible for Hoffa's death. However, Picardo's credibility collapsed under scrutiny. Official reports, special prosecutors, and even Picardo's own FBI handlers acknowledged that he was a pathological liar who fabricated stories to curry favor and secure his release from prison. Picardo had no first-hand knowledge of Hoffa's disappearance and admitted to speculating that if Tony Pro was involved, then others, like Gabe, would probably be involved too. These guesses, unsupported by any physical evidence, were used to impanel a grand jury and smear Briguglio's name across headlines for decades. Yet the federal government never charged him with any crime related to Hoffa. However, Briguglio, who has never been indicted for the homicide of Hoffa, has been presented time and again in books, documentaries, and movies as a co-conspirator in the said homicide charge, which he fiercely contests. Briguglio stated, "I had nothing, absolutely nothing to do with anything that happened to Mr. Hoffa." In an interview on Fox Nation, Briguglio went on to recall being in New Jersey on the day of Hoffa's disappearance and returning home to his family that night. He insists that, never having been part of the mafia, he only knew Provenzano through business with the Teamsters Union. Briguglio even testified that another fictitious charge, the labor racketeering charge he went to prison for, was fabricated by the testimony of none other than Picardo himself. But with continuous media coverage and public presumptions, most of Briguglios' life has been an uphill struggle defending against a crime he claims he did not commit. With the clock ticking, the Briguglios have been pleading for justice. His daughter Yona has tearfully recounted the struggle of decades of public scrutiny on her family. "My father," she stated, "is finally being heard." She thanked Vandrew for standing up for a man the government never prosecuted but also never cleared. The campaign to clear his name, she added, was courageous and long overdue. Vandrew agrees, calling the situation truly un-American and actually a case of justice denied. Citing Chucky O'Brien and related cases where the government must be held accountable, he insisted that the government's past mistakes must be corrected. "For God's sake, let's end this and clear his name," Vandrew urged. To the Briguglios, it's not only a matter of clearing the record, it's about dignity in the remaining years of a life under suspicion, absent evidence, trial, or justice. Old theories versus new evidence. For decades, one of the most widely circulated theories about Jimmy Hoffa's disappearance has been that his body was disposed of in a chemical vat inside a Detroit factory. According to this long-held belief, Hoffa was slain shortly after his disappearance in 1975 and then placed in an industrial drum or vat of acid to eliminate any trace of his remains. The idea gained traction in the 1980s and was repeated in numerous documentaries, books, and television specials. It appealed to both its brutal finality and its logistical convenience. After all, disposing of a body in a way that leaves no remains has a certain mob-like efficiency. Former mobsters and informants occasionally referenced this possibility in passing, although none offered concrete evidence or first-hand confirmation. Despite its popularity, the acid vat theory was never supported by forensic proof or official findings from the FBI. In recent months, a new twist on Hoffa's mystery exploded online, drawing millions of views on platforms like YouTube. A viral video titled "Jimmy Hoffa Mystery Finally Solved in 2025" claimed to offer definitive proof about Hoffa's final moments and alleged burial site. The video presented a dramatized narrative involving secret informants, digitized maps, and alleged confession documents, weaving them into what appeared to be a groundbreaking revelation. However, neither the FBI nor any credible law enforcement agency has corroborated the claims. Investigators close to the case were quick to label the video speculative at best and misleading at worst. As with many sensational digital claims, the video lacked verifiable sourcing and relied heavily on recycled rumors rather than new, independently confirmed evidence. Instead, they are continuing to hinder by abusing potentially promising leads, such as a recent find at the old Milwaukee County Stadium site, where the Casebreakers, a cold case team, identified soil anomalies with ground-penetrating radar and received 4 hits from an elite cadaver dog named Moxie, all within the area where third base once stood. This isn't hearsay or conjecture, is actual, captured modern forensic data. The coordinates of this point originated from a cryptic clue found on a playing card linked to a deceased, corrupt police officer with known ties to organized crime. Unlike previous theories that have lived mostly in rumor and lore, the Milwaukee discovery presented observable, testable evidence, including a disturbed clay layer and potential human remains. Such is the divergence between myth and science that it speaks to the gulf that is now present between old theories and new breakthroughs. And although the fantasies of the acid vat and other such disposal points have stirred the popular imagination for decades now, they remain unverifiable tales peddled by unreliable witnesses or anonymous claims. But over here, Milwaukee represents physical, on-the-ground clues that suggest the likelihood that Hoffa's body might have been buried and might even have been resettled somewhere by persons really determined to bury the truth as deep as possible. The difference is huge. One relies on mystery and media sensationalism, while the other is grounded in forensic procedure and cross-verified research. Or so this Milwaukee case is likely to become at the end, perhaps, of decades of distraction and folklore, in place of actual answers about what happened to Jimmy Hoffa. But as the facts start stacking up, the real challenge begins, turning this discovery into justice.